Thousands of Haitians are taking to the streets calling for the resignation of the country's prime minister. The anti-government protests come after several weeks of violent demonstrations that were sparked by an announcement that fuel prices would increase. Anger has also been boiling over as gang violence has spiraled out of control in Haiti. Last week, the Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry asked for the international community to deploy armed forces in the country. For more on this, I want to bring in Vania Andre. She's a contributing journalist for the Haitian Times. Vania, can you just tell us exactly what's going on right now in Haiti?
Sure. Thank you for having me. So what we're essentially seeing is a situation that is quickly deteriorating. We see lawlessness on the streets. There's utter chaos, and essentially gangs have completely seized the capital and are blocking access to vital resources like gas and water, which is exacerbating the cholera epidemic that we're starting to see take root into the country. It's really a situation where the government has lost control of what's happening on the ground, and people are hopeless, which is adding to all the protests that we've seen develop over the past couple of weeks.
And these gangs are doing, well, I guess one of the most powerful gangs seized control of a fuel terminal in the country's capital. What are the gangs doing? I mean, other than just creating mayhem, are they seeking to control and is there some end game to all of their violence?
So what's really interesting with these gangs this time around with the chaos that's happening in the country is that they have become increasingly political savvy. They know how to somewhat build political capital within the community. So it's not only a matter of them creating mayhem, it's also a matter of them knowing how to work international media to get their messaging across. They also have boots on the ground in the sense where they're physically able to block access to the ports, to vital areas where people go for water, where people go for food. You have a situation where people cannot leave their homes for weeks. Students are not able to go to school. So it's really a holistic approach that we see them doing this time around that we haven't seen before. It's a much more sophisticated approach. What their end game is to be seen. Today, actually, on the Haitian Times, we published a piece that one of the main leaders of the gangs, Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier, he released a transition plan essentially outlining what he would like to see happen within the country. A lot of that is outside of the realm of our Constitution, but what the end game is yet to be seen. But what we do know is that these gangs are becoming increasingly political savvy, and they know how to work the media and the community.
And now back to the idea of an outbreak. The UN said basically that the country's threatened with an outbreak of cholera, which killed 10,000 in the country after the 2010 earthquake. In the conditions we've been talking about, how does cholera get addressed? Is it even possible? And how dangerous a situation is that?
It's dangerous because the reason why the cholera outbreak is happening is because the gangs have cut access to gas. So now the folks that transport water, they're unable to even get around to access water for people. So now what's happening is that people are forced to use dirty water, contaminated items, and whether or not that's something that will be able to be quelled immediately is yet to be seen. I think a lot of this rests on how much humanitarian help that the U.S. can deploy within the country, and if they're going to be able to even get those needed supplies to folks. Because part of the problem that's going on in Haiti is that the gangs have cut access to major roads and have essentially paralyzed and segregated Port-au-Prince from the rest of the country. So how things actually move around the country is a problem within itself as well.
And the acting prime minister came to power with the support of the U.S. and other major regional powers. What's behind the unpopularity other than the fuel? And is the prime minister without any tools to address these compounding crises?
I think the first problem is that the prime minister is head of a country that has extremely weak institutions. There is no essential law of the land right now that is functioning. Second, this prime minister has allegedly been connected with the assassination of the former president. So that is something that's always going to taint his leadership. And then thirdly, this was a prime minister that was imposed on the people without their will. So when you look at all of these situations, and then on top of that, he doesn't seem to have the strength to be able to pull everything together and address these issues, you're going to have protests because this is not who the people wanted in the first place, and he's implicated in an ongoing investigation.
Finally, quickly, Vania, the U.S. has had a complicated relationship with Haiti. Who can come to Haiti's aid in this moment?
I think it's a multi-pronged approach. I think part of it is going to have to be the U.S., but I think also that we need to look at our regional partners within the region. So, for example, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Cuba, and see what's happening regionally as well. Like CARICOM, we are part of CARICOM, so that way they can be able to work hand in hand with the U.S. to see how we can aid Haiti.
All right, Vania Andre, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.